I am of the opinion that if we should grant the status of personhood, or at least the rights usually associated with that condition, to prenatal human specimens, that abortion should also be made illegal in all circumstances with the exception of rape. And that since we know that human life begins at conception, the ideal anti-abortion law would make no form of discrimination based on the stage of development. Under such a ban, there would be equal protection for fetal humans, embryonic humans, and even for zygotes. Now, to defend my position, I'm going to reference a very famous piece of pro-choice literature entitled A Defense of Abortion. Now, I've brought this essay up in the past. It was originally authored by Judith Jarvis Thompson and published in an issue of Philosophy and Public Affairs in the early 1970s, a little bit before Roe v. Wade hit the Supreme Court. I would highly recommend this essay to all of my viewers, regardless of your position, be it pro-life or pro-choice, simply because it has been so widely proliferated that if you are going to adopt an extroversive position on the issue of abortion, you're eventually going to hear it referenced, and in such circumstances it would obviously behoove you to have familiarized yourself with the content ahead of time. In addition to this, the essay is very entertaining, it's very creative, very colorful, and it has a lot of academic value in that it manages to provide more or less accurate parallels for abortion under various circumstances. Now, in order to create these parallels, the essay employs a series of analogies which are, to be honest, entirely and incredibly outlandish in nature. But I don't want anyone to think that this in any way, shape, or form mitigates the logical validity of the arguments that the essay presents, because analogies themselves aren't arguments. They are tools for communication that arguments employ, as in this essay. And if you attack an argument's validity based on the tool for communication that was employed to present that argument to you, you are ignoring the content, and you can't do that in logic. For example, if my tool for communication was English and I presented a valid argument, my argument would not suddenly become invalid if I translated it into Latin. Now, nobody speaks Latin anymore, and it seems to me to be kind of an absurd language, but in the end, the content is what you have to judge, not the tool for communication. As long as the translation is good and the content is maintained from English to Latin, the argument's validity or invalidity is also maintained. And in the same way, as long as the content is maintained from reality to thought experiment or analogy, as long as you actually have that parallel, it is fallacious to attack your argument because the analogy it employs is fantastical. Alright, so with all of that over, let's get back to defending my original position. I'm going to read a segment from A Defense of Abortion, and this is of course the famous violinist thought experiment which made the essay so popular. And to put this into context, you're basically just supposed to imagine yourself in these circumstances. So, you wake up in the morning and find yourself back to back in bed with an unconscious violinist. A famous unconscious violinist. He has been found to have a fatal kidney ailment, and the Society for Music Lovers has canvassed all available medical records and found that you alone have the right blood type to help. They have therefore kidnapped you, and last night the violinist's circulatory system was plugged into yours so that your kidneys can be used to extract poison from his blood as well as your own. The director of the hospital now tells you, look, we're sorry the Society for Music Lovers did this to you. We would never have permitted it if we had known. But still, they did it, and the violinist is now plugged into you. To unplug you would be to kill him. But never mind. It's only for 9 months. By then he will have recovered from his ailment and can be safely unplugged from you. Now, Judith goes on to elaborate by explaining that the exact period of time doesn't really matter. It could be something seemingly insignificant like 9 minutes, or something obviously cumbersome like 9,000 years. And we must also notice that there are some very flagrant differences between the violinist's situation and the situation of pregnancy resulting from rape. For example, in the violinist situation, you're stuck in bed the whole time, whereas with pregnancy, that's very, very rarely the case. Yet, an undue burden is an undue burden, regardless of the magnitude. In the end, the point is that you have to sacrifice yourself, or at least your freedom of person, for this individual to survive. And while it would be wonderful, admirable, and altruistic for you to do so, we cannot require you play martyr. We cannot make laws which demand that people sacrifice themselves, or their rights, or their liberties, or their bodies for somebody else's benefit. And most everybody in America, as well as the Western world in general, is going to agree with that postulate. So the response that the essay usually elicits, or rather receives quite unfairly, is an attack on the analogy, which is fallacious for reasons that we have already discussed. Yes, the analogies are outlandish, but this does not reflect upon the validity or invalidity of the arguments that employed those analogies as tools for communication. And yes, there do seem to be some differences between the provided parallel and the actual circumstance, but whatever variances can be discovered do appear to be entirely irrelevant and utterly insignificant. So there again appears to be some sort of a dearth of legitimate logical criticism for the arguments, and I find myself obliged to maintain logical consistency by accepting the conclusion and becoming pro-choice in cases of rape. But why don't I extend this to cases of consensual sex? That will be covered in my next video. Thank you.